Item 7.3, consider alternate bid for replacement of Quint fire apparatus.
Says Mike on there.
Yeah, I'm not sure
Are you
how
gonna,
that happened,
I see
in all
somebody
honesty.
walking towards the podium.
I told Chief I'd give a little bit of introduction or background, I guess. As I'm sure you recall, as we were going through the COVID-19 review of the budget and expenditures, the Quint was one of those items, and the timing was such that the bids had come in and they had come in over budget, and so we had a little bit of conversation about alternatives, and we postponed that purchase, both out of concern about the amount that the bids came in at, as well as just kind of our finances needing to take a look at those. So I think Chief's report covers a lot of that ground, and he's ready to take it from here.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Commissioners. As Mike said, that in late February, bids came in. We were set to present to the Commission who we selected for the bid proposals, and then the COVID situation hit and everything was put on hold. At that meeting, at the April 6th, 2020 City Commission meeting, we were given directions to maybe go back and, quote, value engineer some of the bids. Battalion Chief Dave Turner, who specifically wrote the bids, reached out to the two top bidders and presented him a list of things that would still meet our specifications. I think the list it was the same list of both vendors, and that list was included in the blue sheet. Either by happenstance or not, it came out the same bidder, which was Rosenbauer Apparatus, came back again with the lower bid. And in the blue sheet, as you can see, what the original bids were on the left-hand side, and the revised amount in parentheses was after we reached out to the value engineered specifications. Also, part of that, at the very top, you'll see a manufacturer called HME Demo. We were also given guidance to maybe look out for a demo model or a stock model. At the time, we could not find anything out there now. The HME bid was a stock demo model at the time, but as you'll notice, per even their own letter to the bidding process, it did not meet department specifications, and there was over 28 different areas that stock model didn't meet from the original bid, even though it was the lowest one. Fiscal note, this was part of the capital improvement program, and Ms. Pack was going to explain a little bit about how the purchasing and the funding was going to be. Also, it should be noted that even though the revised Rosenbauer bid was $835,474, we budgeted $854, so it did come in under bid. That would not be the actual amount. That would be the contract amount, and we would be given what they call discounts several times during the process. One is called a chassis discount and an optional discount. So the actual amount total at the end of when it's all said and done is going to be $821,322 from Rosenbauer. Ms. Pack also mentioned the actual timing on when these discounts would be applied and when the first payments would be given. It's approximately a 428-day or 425-day build process, so we would not be taking possession of this probably until at least the end, mid-2021, depending on how far we get along. They were shut down just like everyone else. They're backed up too. So it's usually about a 340-day build process. They put it back out to 425. And Rosenbauer, the manufacturer here, did extend their pricing on this twice with a June 30th deadline to honor this price. So I'd be glad to answer any questions. I have Chief Turner here also, who actually wrote the specifications for this piece of apparatus. This was replacing a 21-year-old apparatus that has had considerable mechanical issues, especially in the last 3 to 4 months.
Would the 21-year-old become the backup then?
Yes, the 21-year-old. Right now we have a 26-year-old Quint as the backup. This will move to reserve status. It's a 2000 American LaFrance, which American LaFrance didn't even manufacture anymore. They've gone out of business, so it's still a frontline machine. and it would be used as a reserve. This isn't a regular Schedule A replacement program, too. We have a pretty aggressive replacement program, and this was scheduled for this year.
Chief Royce, I have a few questions. First of all, I want to thank you guys for going through this exercise because I know these specs are not easy to work through, and it's a book about like this.
I brought it if you want to see it.
If I remember, it's quite substantial. On the detail sheet, the very bottom item talks about travel expense. It's listed as savings, but it looks to me like that's really just a transfer from them to us. So we will incur travel expense. It's just a question of whether it's a part of the purchase price or not.
Yes and no. The process for this is usually we make 3 trips. A pre-build where we actually sit down with them, go over it, a mid-build when it's halfway built, and then a final delivery. Due to the COVID, they've learned how to do their business a little bit different, just like everybody else is. And technically, we've sat down with Rosenbauer and done the pre-build virtually. So that would take that. Our only expense on this is going to probably be a final delivery, only travel expense, where we would go and inspect it before we take it.
To go up, inspect it, and bring it back.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, my other question, I guess I was looking through these details, and it looks like to me that some of the things we're giving up, for example, a year worth of warranty on the cabin chassis. Do I read that correctly? From a 2-year warranty to a 1 year? At the bottom of the first section on the proposed changes
on the
schedule.
Rosenbauer side?
Yeah. It set up Rosenbauer proposed
It's
changes,
down on
cost
the next to
reductions.
last section area, under aerial.
Got it. Aerial warranty and workmanship.
Well, it says cabin chassis warranty goes from 2 years to 1 year. That's correct. Okay. And there's some other changes there that, the change in the engine, this is a vehicle that, may be sitting on site for a fire like the Anderson leather goods or something similar. It might be sitting there for hours pushing water, which is not easy to push. Okay. And I'm concerned about if that, in fact, powering that engine down could create a situation where maybe it's not adequately cooled because it's having to work a little bit too hard in that circumstance. And if this thing is going to be frontline for 20 years or thereabouts, and then for perhaps backline, we need to consider that. What I'm getting to is, and I look at these changes, and I'm starting to think that maybe the value decision is to go with the original proposal as it was configured instead of the quote-unquote valued engineered proposal. And I'm gonna allow you to respond to that, but and I'm the one who used the value engineered term. But in looking at what you guys have put together, I'm a little bit reluctant to give up a year's worth of warranty. I'm a little bit reluctant to give up some of these other things that I think are actually pretty valuable over the course of the time we're going to hold this vehicle. And I'm not sure that the savings we realize for removing those is really a value decision for us to step it back a little bit.
Okay. Chief, you got any?
Could I just piggyback one question? I had some of the same concern. Do you give up functional ability by reducing the cab by 10 inches? I mean, if you could just
No, there's some
address
cuts that I made won't affect the vehicle, but engine performance and all that warranty over the life of the truck will affect, and I shouldn't say longevity, that they'll still last, but you may have more mechanical issues later on in its life versus going with the 500 horse motor versus the 450 motor. They're actually 2 different models. I mean, it's a bigger motor than what I reduced it to because, I was tasked with taking stuff out. I know how much motors run in these. I mean, it's about a $30,000 savings just to reduce it down to the 450. So I knew that was a big cut right off the get-go to get us down. But longevity on the truck itself, year 15 to 20, you may see some issues. with reducing that size back down, especially in a Quint. I mean, there are already weight issues and
Yeah.
if it was an engine, I would have no issues reducing it down to 425 or 450. Being a Quint, yes, I reduced it down because I knew that was a huge savings. But like I said, I was tasked with doing that, and that's what I brought back
Yeah.
to get the savings.
And I
down.
truly do appreciate it. I think it's a good exercise to go through. But I think if we understand what that means in terms of functionality of the vehicle and reliability of the vehicle, it's important that, when they're on scene, they don't, bite the bullet, so to speak.
And the thing is, the whole motto is that if the stick goes in the air, it's going to be a long fire. They're going to be on scene for a while, so they're going to
Right.
pump a lot of water for a long time if we have to use it. And so.
Question, so going to Commissioner Franz's deal, so originally the bid was $925 for the Rosenbauer. We could take $25,000 off of that for travel because we could do the same thing, correct?
We have 7,500, I believe.
Yeah, this isn't an all or nothing. We can
Right.
actually still
Okay.
take some
So
of
we
these.
could realize the travel savings.
Travel savings.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Travel
And then put it
savings
back
is what
into the
I'm saying.
motor.
Yeah,
Yes.
so you could back that off.
We just wanted to let you see both,
Right.
what both
Sure. Comparing apples,
manufacturers.
exactly.
Right, and to get back to the cab size, I mean, it just gives you more room in the chassis. It doesn't affect the overall ability of the truck, it just makes it bigger for the guys. I mean, that's something that you could still keep reduced to help keep some of the
So we
costs down.
we could get the larger engine in the smaller cab. Okay.
Yes.
The reason I was asking, I got to ride in one of the parades, and there's a lot of stuff in there. And, I mean, I don't know how much the extra 10 inches cost, but
It's
kind of hard to add in once you build it. Yeah.
right, it's quite a bit of savings. I was kind of surprised at the savings on the 10 inches also. It's several $1,000s, but it's several $1,000s that we could save. I mean, it's really not that, the bigger cab's nice, but feasibility, I mean, it's probably something we can.
Considering the amount of time we're actually physically in it.
Yeah.
We could live with 10 inches. Or hire smaller people, I guess.
Well, all the equipment you have to wear, I mean, that takes up all the space.
Other questions for our comment?
I'm just impressed with Commissioner France's expertise on engines.
No expertise on engines. I just know that bigger motors have more power, and when you put them under
They're not
load,
used as hard. Yeah,
they're
not running as-
going to perform better for longer. I mean, that's just the way it is. They
Better
have
to
better
have it and
cooling
not need it
systems.
than need it and not have it.
Yeah, so, well, I'm not sure how to handle this now that you said we can downsize the cab and keep the larger motor and do some of the other stuff, and I just,
We kind of went with what the budgeted amount was and
Right.
basically went backwards. We
Okay.
hit underneath, I mean, with options and things that would still give us what we need operationally as a department.
What about the whole idea of the switch mounting? I noticed that's a different one. Is that dependent on cab size too, or that's separate? Okay.
Basically, this truck was spec'd with a VMUX, a computer system that runs all the different lights and generator, and the switch console on the dash was just an optional deal that we
Okay.
really don't need.
Okay.
So they can wire everything directly into the VMUX, so that's really not an issue moving forward.
And if you were to opt for the larger engine, would the builder allow you just unilaterally swap that? I mean, they would not try to renegotiate the total price differently because of that?
I don't believe so.
That would still, it would put it up, if we just use 30,000 as a number, would put it up to 865. And then with
865
your
about.
discounts again,
Yeah.
coming off, And I didn't put this because we don't know exactly what they would be. I didn't supply this to you, but you're talking almost 20,000 of discounts for prepays and so forth, chassis and the aerial, that would be figured in based on the final contract price. So if you want to go just ballpark numbers, add 15 more to that, puts us right at around the 80 by taking the discounts off and adding the larger motor back.
Right.
And I think if you want to change the alternatives, you could identify what you want added back in. The difficult part's going to be hitting the cost on the head.
I recognize that, and that's why I'm not quite sure how to make the motion, but
Well, and I don't and you took out, like, you had the aerial 2-year warranty, and then there is none. Is that because you no longer have that?
The truck comes standard with a year cab, basically bumper to
So
bumper
we were
warranty.
paying for one additional
we would pay
year,
for
because
the
it doesn't say 1 year
Okay.
over here,
All
because
right.
it doesn't show
So
any.
that's not an automatic add for the 70-inch cab? Okay, so
It's
I
a one.
misinterpreted that, but no surprise there, huh? Well, I will move that we authorize the purchase with the provision that we go with a 60-inch cab and a larger engine, and is there anything else there that you find is,
No, like on the cab warranty for the paint, it comes standard with a
1 year?
prorated warranty on the paint anyway.
Okay,
So
okay,
what we were doing, we were adding on to it,
okay,
because we've had paint issues in the past with different vendors.
yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Firemen are kind of cliquish on how their trucks look, so we don't like a whole bunch of, so that's why I extended the warranty and extended the paint warranty just on issues that we've had in the past.
Right.
Rosenbauer is really good about prorating their standard paint warranty out, so that's why he came back to us and said, hey, I'll sell you what you guys want.
Yeah.
But I'm telling you, we already prorated for this, and, you're really not saving anything because we already prorated, but, we'll sell you the warranty if you want it. It's just
Okay.
extra. And, so it made sense.
So why don't we, that's the motion.
Second.
Actually, it looks like that was pretty much, was it option number 2, to accept that with amendments as
Right.
the city commission deems appropriate? So the amendment that we would be authorizing is upgrading to the larger sized engine. Really, that's the only change, correct?
That is
Cabin engine.
apparently about the only change then that we're talking about.
Cab and engine?
Yeah.
So just to be
Well,
clear,
there-
you're authorizing the added cost associated with the 450 horsepower, 9-liter, 3,000 Allison engine.
Yeah, being upgraded to the 500
500.
horsepower.
Yeah, I'm sorry, correct.
Yeah,
Correct.
yeah. That is correct. It's my understanding that will be about $30,000 or thereabouts on top of that 835.
I think it's 27,000 to be exact.
Okay.
Just save 3,000.
Okay, is that motion about as clear as mud now?
Absolutely. Second.
Okay, I guess we should have asked for comments before we go any further. We have any comments from the public? Okay. Okay, if not, we have a motion, a second on the floor to approve the purchase of the Rosenbauer with the additional the larger cab and engine per the specs.
Smaller cab.
Smaller cab.
Smaller cab. Did I say larger cab? Smaller cab, larger engine.
Yeah.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that passes. Thank you, gentlemen. Okay, that brings us to 7.4.
Item 7.4, community forum format discussion.
Okay, Mr. Scruggs.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. Yes, last week, following comments in the Citizens Forum about concerns about the police department and kind of the same conversation or similar conversation to what occurred today. In other business, you discussed next steps. I reported to you at that time that Chief Nelson had been in contact with some community leaders and organizers of some of the prior protests, and that I had reached out to some community leaders as well. And we talked about the likelihood of a forum. You indicated that you'd like to target June 29th as that date, and I indicated we could try to work towards that. It probably makes it a little bit more of a city-directed process than something where we're trying to facilitate something to be put on by others. And a couple of things that you specifically asked for were an inventory of the issues that had been raised previously. There were quite a few, and you indicated while you're trying to keep track of that, you wanted a good inventory of that, and then proposed format. So staff, the police department staff went back and listened to the video and provided the attached inventory. And the things that we identified that came out of, that were main themes were, at that time, police officer interviewing and hiring process, the use of force policy, our current policy compared to what's recommended or proposed, the review process in terms of use of force occurrences, the Citizen Review Board's role and authority, consequences for violation of policies, Salina Police Department's participation in the federal 1033 surplus property program, less lethal equipment alternatives, requiring warnings before shooting, and the cost of obtaining police reports. And so, as I said, those are kind of the main themes that came out of the feedback that have been received so far. He also asked us to outline possible talking points, or actually in advance of the meeting, we had taken it upon ourselves to outline additional talking points. And I won't read them all to you, but in terms of categories, the things that we'd identified were the accreditation process that we currently participate in, the fact that our policies are posted on the city's website, our use of body and dash cameras, the accountability measures that are in place, our use of force policy and the review of use of force, our complaint options and process, the availability of videos for public viewing, the Law Enforcement Advisory Board, their membership role and the process that they follow, and then non-discrimination initiatives that are currently in place. So then you also asked us to propose to you a format of that forum for your consideration. And I had mentioned previously, and I touched on in my report, some of the feedback that I received was the importance of and the desire for what I'm calling a listening session, or an opportunity to be heard rather than us just initiate a presentation on here's what we do and what we have in place. And so, obviously we need to start with introductions, and then the proposed format is to allow for a listening session. You heard some stories or testimony today about personal experiences as recent as last week, apparently, that I found pretty moving, and I think there's a sense that there may not be a full appreciation of what the Salina's climate and culture is, and there's importance in starting with that listening session before we just jump into conversation. Having said that, and not knowing how long that might last, then the most likely next step would be to review and respond to the community feedback we've received so far. So far, staff has tried not to be defensive, tried not to be proactive in terms of explaining our current approach, for fear that seems like we are defensive or dismissive of the concern. But I do think there is plenty of information to be provided in terms of just background information about what we do, and that gives you more to go on in terms of what you think the focal points might need to be and what opportunities for change or improvement there might be. So again, I won't read that list to you again, but the most likely next step then would be to give the police department an opportunity to speak to the concerns that have been raised so far, and then additional talking points that we've identified that I don't think have come out very specifically in the citizen comments were our accreditation process, our use of body and dash cameras, and then citizen complaints, options to file those complaints and the review process for those. And then lastly, if time allows, and I recognize this may be a pretty lengthy conversation by the time we're done. But if time allows, then we could review additional topics and next steps. If need be, it might be that we need to break that into, see where our logical break point might fall and recognize that this might have to happen over multiple sessions. One of the things I said last week was some of the feedback that I got was not to have it in the city-county building, to have it somewhere in some community location. And as the packet was going out on Thursday, we got clarification from the county where they stand on COVID-19, and so they have reopened. There's not a mass gathering numeric limit anymore, but there's still a recommendation that we observe social distancing. And as we see just from the attendance at our citizens forum portion of the meeting, we're kind of maxing out this room if we're going to observe social distancing. So I expect a greater attendance, the need for another location. Staff's working on that. We've looked at a few options. One that we're kind of gravitating to is Sam's Chapel at Kansas Wesleyan. The president of Kansas Wesleyan offered that up. The thing that's appealing from a staff perspective is we don't have to set it up in terms of, it's certainly an ample amount of space. We don't have to set up chairs and try to physically force social distancing. People can just elect to social distance throughout the space, and we're working with them currently in terms of sound system and confirming availability of microphones and sound systems. So I think that's probably going to be the most turnkey location that we've identified so far. The other locations we looked at, we're a little concerned about space, we're concerned about sound system, we're concerned about chairs and getting the space set up. So having said that, that's where we're at this point. The other thing that I'm working on is a moderator. Have spoken to some individuals, and they were pretty forthcoming in saying, I want to be there, but I'm not moderator material. I'm too invested in the topic, but I think we have some leads on some possible moderators that know the topic and might be able to just kind of serve in that role appropriately. So we're still working on that as well. But you've also mentioned, the desire for a study session. I think there is value in that. I think when the time is right or when you're ready, the police department's very ready and willing to speak in greater detail about the initiatives that are in place and what they do in terms of racial profiling training and fair policing and discipline and oversight and use of force. I mean, I don't want to get bogged down in the details, but I think if rather than a blanket prohibition on use of force, I think we need to have a conversation about what type of situations necessitate, how the use of force continuum works. I mean, one of the comments we had was that officers have to be required to exhaust all remedies, but, depending on the circumstance, it escalates from a conversation to a physical confrontation. And if an officer is expected to work their way through that use of force continuum, it may not be practical. Those are some of the things, some of the additional detail that when the time's right, I think the police department can share how we put concept into practice and how they oversee and police that. But I'll stop there. We've tried to provide you what you asked for in the way of deliverables in terms of a summary of what's been brought up so far and a proposed agenda for that community forum. So with that, I'll be happy to try to answer any questions.
And this would be the 29th?
Yeah, we're trying to target the 29th. So coming out of this meeting, we'll need to get a press release and social media information together and get things finalized. The other thing I would say is one of the feedbacks that I received was that it is broader than just the police department, that community leaders should be invited. And I've had some conversations with representatives of different organizations, but we'd want to extend an invitation to some of the examples that were given were bankers and the school district and the university, and some of them have already indicated an interest in attending. I don't envision that we're going to have everyone at the dais collectively, but to know that they're there, they've been invited, and they're there to hear the conversation, and they could go to the microphone if they chose.
Would we, during this, would we try to, and I want to be careful about the way I say this, because I don't want to make it sound like we're limiting comments, but it's in the sense of managing time, would we just allow people to come up to the microphone as they wished, or would we require some sort of sign-up list to put them in order so that we'd have some idea throughout the meeting that, well, this is going to be 3 hours or it's going to be 7.5 hours, and no, we're going to have to break it off somewhere midstream and extend to another date. And I, there are ups and downs to both of them. If you have a sort of sign-up list, you can be perceived as being controlling on who and what, who can speak and what can be said. If you don't do that, then you run the risk of having some people who may be a little bit more reticent to step forward publicly and speak not being heard because they simply don't, push themselves out in front. And I don't know what the balance to that is.
I certainly don't claim to have the right answer, or the answer.
Yeah.
What I would say is, in my observation with kind of open mic, making it available and encouraging people to share their stories, it felt to me like it may not even happen. It was 5 minutes or more of people trying to decide whether they wanted to speak. And then once the conversation got started, one story prompted another, and people, it might have caused people to think of something they hadn't thought of before or get the courage to speak. And so it seemed to build momentum. And so I do have a concern that if
I
it's...
suspect from our experience here over the last couple of weeks, that won't be a problem.
Well, but it depends on the group that you're trying to get comments from. Yep.
Yeah.
So I understand the sense of urgency, but at the same time, I do have the concern that if you stifle it, then we're not off to a good start.
Although the listing doesn't really stifle. I mean, even in a meeting like this, we ask people to give their name, but for the record, ideally we could actually ask them just to write their name for us to make sure we get the spelling right. But I could see the meeting going on for 5 or 6 hours, and this is an aggressive agenda, so to speak. And at some point, just an open mic has to be limited.
Question, have we thought about reversing this order? In that, if we know that we're trying to give, say, a 20-minute overview of our policing policies or where to find that information. I just had a very brief conversation, and Deputy Chief Morton pointed out to me where I can find a lot of that information on the city's website. So if we started out with the information and then proceed to open microphone, I don't know. I feel like if you have everybody share their story and there's that emotion that's been spent in bringing their experiences, and then we go through all of the items that you have listed here, I feel like it kind of diminishes their experiences and what they want us to hear, and then we get bogged down in the details of how the police department functions or whatever. So my feeling is we should probably lead off with very brief information and then go to an open mic, or just stick strictly to an open mic and plan a study session as soon as possible to help educate us about some of the questions that have been raised by the police. But I just want to let you know, I feel a sense of urgency. So, I think we need to get in motion somehow.
I like that idea, because that may actually crystallize questions that people have about a particular part of the policy. And a lot of, I'm not going to say pretend that I've memorized the city code. Haven't even tried to memorize the city code. There's too much stuff in it. So there are going to be things that I will hear for the first time. And that might then shape a question or a suggestion that I would have during the open mic.
Well, again, I'm not saying that I have the right answer. What I would tell you is staff's instinct was to do just that, to start with, let's just answer these questions. I mean, the sense of urgency to respond is definitely there. And so we were, on my part, I was deliberately trying to take into account, that emphasis that was stressed to me about the need to listen first.
Listening, yes.
But I do agree, and I had that marked down that I thought it might be, as we've talked about, we all need to be educated. There's things that we obviously don't know about some of these, and I think the public needs to hear it also. I would prefer to do that first. I agree with Commissioner Hodges. Whether it's 30 minutes or 45, it could go on for, I don't know. We need to set a time limit on it too, but
Yes,
at least,
please.
Yeah.
We need to set a time limit on it.
but to discuss some of because the police department's heard some of the concerns, and they can answer some of those to a certain extent within what their hiring policies and their training policies are, and it may even bring up some questions or comments about that. But I would prefer to have the staff go first.
But I don't know if it helps. We can start by acknowledging the fact that we have listened to multiple comments over multiple weeks, and so these comments are in response to what we've heard so far.
I agree with both Commissioner Hodges and Mayor Hoppick. Definitely need some background, because I have gone on the website, and while I'm not the world's most adept web cruiser, I do a fair job at it, and I did find the police standing orders, and I have skimmed through them. I actually printed some of them off. I found a brochure on the advisory committee or the advisory board, which is different than the brochure that we were handed last week. So and neither one of them are dated, so I don't know which one is current. I have been unable to find the bylaws for the group. I've been unable to find any minutes for the group, and I was a little bit disconcerted that we had a young man stand up today and said he's looked at the bylaws. Well, I can't find them, So I would like that kind of package of information about all that stuff ahead of time, if possible, because I do have concerns about that particular element of this, some heightened concerns about that particular element of this discussion. So there is, I think, a need for background information. If you'd have asked me 6 weeks ago, and this isn't a partial response to a request we had earlier, if you'd asked me 6 weeks ago if we had any of this surplus equipment, I would have said probably not. But then a couple of weeks ago, I started seeing posts on Facebook about the $200,000 vehicle, and it stirred a memory. And some years back, I do remember being at least ancillary to a conversation in which that was mentioned. And that concerns me. I would like to hear reasoning for why we have it and why we haven't given it back or cut it up for scrap or whatever. That does present, in my view, an image issue at the very least. So I just, I need lots of background. I will admit that there are lots of things about the details of this and some of the things that have been discussed that I am not well versed on.
Just so that there's no misconception, the whole time we were designing the police training facility, part of that building is storage space for that vehicle, because where it's been kept is not the greatest place. We've always known we've had it. Fortunately, I hope none of y'all have ever had to see it come down your block. It's good that it doesn't get much use.
Yeah, I agree. And that may be of where I picked up my impression, but it didn't register with me the way it does now,
Exactly. And I understand right where you're coming from, because did I know we needed to create a space to store this vehicle? I did, but I never really thought about it, about the fact that it does represent, whether it's in a parade or whatever, that it sends a pretty definite message about militarization, probably won't get that out right, and force as opposed to community building. And I think that I have a different perspective now than I did 6 months ago. So.
But now that's not being sent out to serve a warrant to show up in court. I mean,
No.
and we don't see it very often. I mean, it's.
I've never seen it.
Right.
I've seen it once.
Right.
I saw it
think I saw it
once.
at a parade.
And again, something like that is, I saw it in use once, and I believe it was over by Stewart School. There was an incident, and again, that was there to protect the police officers that had to go into that situation. So it wasn't to show a sign of force, I don't believe. I think it was to show, I mean, it was there for the protection of the individuals that were responding to that. So I think we need to listen. Again, the police force has been under a lot of stress, and, you know, we sit here and we think about lack of, you know, we talk about the not using force, but it wasn't that many years ago where we were having school shootings, we were talking about how were we going to intervene and how, you know, we were going to be putting our police force in harm's way. So we tell them one thing one time, and we've got them all over the place, and then we talk about, you know, we're responding to the homeless and different things. So we're asking them to do a lot of things. And I think we need to listen to what the policies are, and we need to listen to their story a little bit too. And there's got to be a coming together on all that to make it work.
I agree more, and I think that that's part of the conversation that I'm sure that the law enforcement would like to be a part of too, because I'm sure that when they get a call for a homeless person or a person that's obviously got mental health issues, I don't think that by any stretch of the imagination that they're looking forward to dealing with that, especially if they don't themselves have the resources that they need to help that person. So, I agree.
Subject to the summaries, though,
Yeah.
I agree that those would be useful to have, and especially if we could have them in advance, both policies that are in existence, which no one's, at least up here, and the public as well, don't seem to be terribly familiar. It's not really our bailiwick. We don't do policing. It's not our profession. It'd be useful to have some insight to that, and also what we've heard the last 2 weeks from the public, those major bullet points that
And have that
expressed here.
accessible to the public.
But accessible, at least as a packet coming in, but
Right.
probably in advance of the meeting.
Thursday afternoon. But
Well, we've started working on answering questions related to the Law Enforcement Advisory Board, and so that's underway. The use of force policies are currently in effect. There's some cross-referencing in some of these documents that bring in other policies, but I think we can compile that information. I don't know that we're going to be able to give you a narrative overview of that along with compiling that information by Thursday. And then my other concern, I guess, is with respect to the community forum, we'll be doing good to give the chief and other representatives of the police department an opportunity to address these topics. If we're going to deliberate each one of these,
No, I think we this is more of an educational. We're not going to go back, and this isn't I don't think at this point we're going to have that much time.
And I think if the policy exists, I wouldn't necessarily add a narrative. I would just let people read it and form their own opinion. I mean,
Right.
which is all we're going to do.
Right. The policy
it can at least be a
exists,
starting
here's what
point.
to
At
find
this
in.
stage, we're just getting all the cards on the table.
right? Yep. I think we can certainly do that, and I think we're going to have to probably start out recognizing that we're going to commit a block of time, and if we hit that, we're going to have to reconvene, because if we don't, we could be there all night. And this is more than one meeting.
Right. And speaking of time, this is going to be an evening meeting?
Yes, the thinking was it'd
I'd
be-
suggested 6 o'clock or something. If that sounds reasonable. And I like the Sam's Chapel idea, if that's available.
Okay.
And we haven't resolved the order of the meeting yet. I am, like I say, I'm kind of conflicted. I am inclined to listen first. if we can get some background information coming into the meeting, then listen and then, but, you know.
Well, I think public needs the same background information that we do, because,
Well,
a lot of us
okay,
come
okay.
into discussions like this
All right.
spouting what we think is true, what we
Maybe
think
you
we've
look to
heard.
members of the Sunflower
Yeah,
Coalition and
we
ask them
hear-
what they think.
There's assumptions made, and
Right.
perhaps we need to have a little more information, so.
Assuming we get the information pulled together for you, we can certainly make it available online for the public, but,
Yeah.
Okay, should we, I guess with that, we'll open up the public if there's any comments or any discussion.
We just had some thoughts on like the order of the
Name
meeting.
again, I'm sorry.
Oh, say my name again.
Yeah.
Luke Stanford
Thank you.
from Salina. And anyway, what I wanted to say is that we just had some thoughts on like the order of the meeting. And so what we think would be good is making sure that everyone has that background information, like what Commissioner Hodges was saying. We think that'd be great. And then just making sure we have a listening session afterwards. But I think this really might spill into several different events. Maybe like a listening event where you guys provide that background information and hear the community at large rather than just our group and rather than just who's been coming to or who've been able to come to these meetings. Just listen to them, and then maybe having another meeting where you kind of deliberate with it and just talk about the policies and making sure that the voices of the police as well as the people are heard, because we want to hear we want to hear both sides of it, but we just want to make sure that everyone knows the policies and that they know what's happening right now as well, and that we know what your stances on those policies are going forward. What changes are you going to make, if any at all, which we'd hope you'd make, but just kind of what action is actually going to be taken is what we'd really like to gain from all of this as well. But that's pretty much
Okay.
everything I have. If you have any
Thank
questions.
you. I wrote your name down this time, Luke, so, thank you. And I think that is, our goal is to hear all this, and at some point, whether it's a study session or something, then's when we have to really address the policies and stuff, so this is.
Yeah, exactly.
But,
So it's
yeah.
kind of like talking about it first, listening,
Yeah.
making sure we know where the community is on this, and just going from there and making sure we know where we are now and where we need to be in the future is really what we're hoping for.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Could I just ask, sort of a follow-up to that, does the city have the ability to receive comments from people who know they wouldn't be able to make the meeting? Or suggest?
in writing or by email, similar to what they could do for a city commission
So
meeting.
that could be listed with the information that's posted? Okay, thanks.
For that matter, would it be possible to just have it sent directly to our shared city commission address so that we're basically getting them in real time?
Right, that's what I was thinking,
Yeah,
is
that'd be
make that
great.
address available.
Yeah.
Good idea.
Okay, anyone else?
I definitely agree that it's a good idea to have the listening meeting on June 29th, because like you're saying, there's a lot and this is going to take a long time. My concern is like when we keep saying in the future we'll have a more back and forth discussion. I was wondering if we could set a date for that, or if we could have like June 29th be the date that we'll figure out the date for the next thing. I just kind of wanted some concrete ideas about like definitely moving it forward with like set dates and times, just not letting that like hang in the future.
I can't guarantee you that on the 29th, we'll be able to give you another date. You haven't been working with city government, have you? It's kind of a joke, but we will try to keep this on the, moving along, but it depends on what direction we give everyone as to how soon that could take. I mean, we're asking city staff to put stuff together by next Thursday to go out, but we will keep that in mind. Okay, thank you.
Miranda Bachman, I just wanted to say that, speaking from personal experience, it is not that hard to put something together very fast, and it's not that hard to set up another date. I think that if you go in on the 29th and you say, hey, we're going to have a follow-up meeting in 3 weeks, and in 3 weeks we're going to have these questions answered, and we're going to have what you guys want, and we don't know where or what time it'll be, but we know it's going to be in 3 weeks. That gives everybody a timeline, and that gives you all a timeline of what you can do to figure out what we as a community need, or as a group, or whatever. I personally, when you were talking about having the police department there and about what they're already doing and things that they have in place, I myself would kind of like to hear maybe their own suggestions on, maybe they don't have the resources to handle some of these homeless people. What would they like to see happen? Or, if they don't have, if we can reallocate some of their funds, where would they like to see them go? Or what funds can we cut from them? I don't know that it has to be some you versus us thing, you know what I mean? I think that everybody can kind of work together and say, hey, in 3 more weeks, we're going to have a meeting, and we don't know what we're going to say yet, but we'll be here, and I hope that you show up. You know what I mean? I just want to say that it's not that hard to give people a date of when you're going to be there, and I really hope that the mayor and Carl Ryan show up and have a lot to say, because I know that other people have. So I appreciate all your guys' hard work, and I really hope that there is a schedule following this open forum.
Ms. Bachman, just a comment. You versus us, I at least am trying very hard to avoid that. I think we all feel it's important that we work together and we move forward. And I would like to recognize some of the young people who spoke and who have gone out of their way to say, I don't think our police officers are bad people. I don't think our department's a bad department. But there are concerns that come out of history, that come out of experience in other communities that we would like to see addressed, and I thank them for that.
And then I also, Luke Stanford, one point that I forgot to touch up on is the Public Accountability Board. That's something that we really want to hear a lot more about that, because it took us.
Say that again.
The Police Advisory Board.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we'd really like for you guys to touch on those points, because it took us hours upon hours just to find anything on that, like the bylaws that we mentioned. It took I think it took Eddie like 3-4 hours to find that. It took him a while, but it's just there's this really lack of transparency, and that causes a lot of paranoia among people. And I think that would put a lot of people's minds at rest if you were educated on that and kind of explained that maybe in the beginning, the public or the Police Advisory Board, and maybe just kind of address some of those issues that we pointed out today with how they're appointed and how they're private and stuff. So that's just another point I wanted to make sure it's addressed.
Thank you.
John Blanchard. One of the things that I'd really like to, I appreciate, Commissioner Franz, your desire to have all of that information and as much information, and also, Commissioner Davis, your feelings that needs to be made available to the public. I think those are two very critical parts of the public education part of this, all of our education. A couple things that I want to bring to your attention, and that is that the one thing that I've found that we really need to do as part of this thing is we need to admit when we know we can do better, instead of trying to just say it's not broken, don't try to fix something that's not broken. This Law Enforcement Advisory Board may be very well intentioned, but I don't think it was ever set up properly. I don't think it's ever been not broken. If you want to look at the City of Newton, City of Larned, any number of cities out there, Consolidated Wyandotte County, all of their boards are public boards. They have agendas and minutes. They are governed by COMA, and they have been established either by resolution, or in the case of Consolidated Wyandotte County, it has been, their board was formed by ordinance. So there is an accountability factor there and a public recording mechanism in place that, if you're truly interested in transparency, if you're truly interested in a public service board, then I think you need to think seriously about scrapping the current configuration of that board and configure it in a way either by ordinance or by resolution, and formally establish that board in order to gain public trust. Thank you for agreeing to have that meeting, and look forward to next Monday. Thank you.
Any other comments? Okay, bring it back to the commission. So Have we come to a consensus on how we want to move forward?
I move that we have the meeting structured so that current policies are described in an informative but brief manner, following a rough outline as the city manager's listed, and then open up for public comment. And if we can complete it all in one day, then meet probably no sooner than 2 weeks, because it's going to be a lot of information to assemble to take the next step. I mean, deliberate, assimilate, whatever shape that's going to take.
Second that.
Okay, got a motion second. I guess I'll be in touch with Mike. We'll try to find a mediator to mediate the meeting. I think it's beneficial that it's not one of us. We're trying to find an outside mediator, so to do that. So,
Yeah,
I'm not sure if mediator is
Go
quite
ahead.
the term.
Facilitator.
Facilitator.
How's that? Facilitator.
Something.
Thank you. Yeah.
Somebody to manage the meeting.
Manage the meeting. Yeah.
Moderator.
So.
And moderator, yes.
Okay. So we have a motion, a second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, that passes.
and I would just want to say, particularly maybe to the younger folks, sometimes you got to be a little patient to get it right. Yeah, there's an old term, and every couple of years, quality people come up with new terms. I learned it as continuous quality improvement. 30 years ago, it had another term, but if you don't define your problem, you probably aren't going to get the right solution. So this is, we're trying to correct society here in 2 weeks, which is a fairly daunting task, because I think what you're going to find is that a lot of the answers are going to extend way beyond police boundaries. So just be patient. Keep us to the fire, but be patient. We'll try to get something done. I know some of y'all are off to college soon, but we'll get something done before that.
Okay. That brings us to 7.5.
I promise this won't be anything like super radical or anything. Do I have to state my name again for this one?
Yes,
Yeah,
please.
Santiago Vasquez here in Salina. Just in response to Commissioner Davis. Yeah, no, we obviously understand that you cannot correct the problem, like systemic issues within society overnight. We never entered this expecting that to happen. We understand that it's going to take a lot more. So, we're going to keep showing up to the meetings, hearing what everyone has to say, continuing to collect information. And that will be a continual process, even after, we go off to college, we have other people lined up to continue that work. And so on that front, we fully understand and are prepared to continue moving forward with that process. We just ask that the commissioners, continue to show us that they are willing to move forward with any recommendations found in the community, with any information that was able to be gathered. And we also request that any information that is gathered be made open to the public, because we are doing our very best to collect information in any ways that we can, whether that be like through finding documents online or having to request them from different organizations. Making that process easier would definitely be able to help us get a clear understanding of what we specifically want to see changed within the community. Like, we've reviewed, the SPD's policy. We've taken a look at, the bylaws of the commission, to understand where within their policy and within their mechanisms they are not functioning properly. Just anything to facilitate that and to make sure that we address this on a level of, what in writing can we put down to make this better. Just to show that there is movement forward. Otherwise, we risk creating the disillusionment of the people, which would be bad for everyone's front, because that causes utter chaos, and you cannot have any movement forward if people just don't believe that there is movement forward. So on that front, we will continue to be here. We'll continue to voice our opinions and voice whatever information that we find, and we will happily sit here until a change is made. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Santiago. Okay, that leads us to 7.5. we turn this, okay.
I'm sorry.
Make some introductory comments. The budget's tough enough in any given year. With COVID and what we're experiencing with the pandemic, we're still waiting on sales tax numbers, hopefully yet this week, to see what April looked like in terms of the stay-at-home order. And that might be a starting point for us to revisit our forecast. But we also then are on a deadline to prepare the 2021 budget. And so I think the next slide summarizes that we asked staff to budget to the 2020 revised budget. And if you recall, that was pretty significantly reduced in anticipation of the pandemic impacts. We reviewed those 2021 budget requests and compared them with both 2020 revised and 2019 actuals. 2019 actual numbers are the ones that are the most current and that we can kind of sink our teeth into. And I have to say that I personally put a lot of my focus on the change from 2019 actual to the proposed 2021, recognizing there's a year and a half in between that time frame that's essentially being discounted. As Debbie's reporting in this slide, we had the departments detail any line item request greater than $5,000, and we went through each one of those and tried to parse out periodicals and dues and whatever the case may be. And here we are in a $40 million budget or more, and we're parsing $250 here and there, but it's just the times we find ourselves in. And then lastly, we spent a lot of time talking about what do we do about revenue projections, and unfortunately don't have a real good answer on that. I think I've mentioned to you, I know I've mentioned to staff, I think I've mentioned to you before that I fully expect between now and January 1 of 2021 that we should know quite a bit more about the pandemic, the recurrence of the pandemic, the financial recovery, everything from what March, April, May do to our finances, to what's unemployment look like after the $600 a week goes away on July 25th. What kind of recovery are we seeing out of our businesses? So using 2019, nominal growth on 2019, I felt like was kind of the middle ground as a starting point. We're not cutting it so much that we're under budgeting and could put ourselves in a position where we actually outperform when we aren't prepared for it, nor are we being naive or overly optimistic in terms of things will get back to normal. I don't think we have reason to expect they're fully going to get back to normal. So as we went through, and what we're prepared to talk to you today about are operational expenses. So as we looked at operational expenses, we looked at those relative to 2019 year to date, and without starting with some identified revenue total that we were budgeting to. It's more just incremental change that we thought was necessary given what we knew about each particular department or line item. So with that, it'd probably be good if we go through the operational budgets, let Debbie do that, and then we can double back to our level of comfort in terms of what we think 2020 or 2021 might bring for us. So with that, I'll turn it over to Debbie.
Thank you. Good evening, Commissioners. Debbie Pack, Director of Revenue. The first couple of slides, I just wanted to provide you just the update with the April 30th, 2020 information. We're not going to spend much time on that, just to basically just kind of gives you an idea where we are as of April 30th. We are working on May 31st numbers, so we should have those out soon. I will say, Mike, we did get some numbers today. They're not as bad as we expected. The only number I remember right off the top of my head was that our city sales tax was down 4.9%. We anticipated that number to be in the double digits. So we haven't had a chance to really dig into those numbers. I mean, we just got them like at 1 o'clock today. So it's better than anticipated, but it still wasn't it's not moving positive. So we'll try to get those numbers out to you in the next week or so, just the detail of those numbers. Tara did look a little bit at some of the detail, and obviously the accommodations and and restaurants were low as we anticipated. Grocery and merchandising was up as we anticipated. Auto sales were not down as far as we anticipated. So there there's some give and take in those numbers as far as what we looked at. So that was semi-good news for bad news. So those are the April 30th numbers. The next thing we need to do is every year we need to come to you and we need to get kind of a consensus on where we want our target fund balances to be. That's part of our budget process. It's usually done pretty early in the process. So I've provided you with where we are at the end of 2019 as far as a fund balance, what our target fund balance was in the 2020 budget. We are not recommending any changes at this time because, as Mike said, we really don't know what's going to happen, so we're trying to be conservative about where we're going with these numbers. I did also provide kind of where the reasoning was behind some of these numbers as we went through them. For example, the general fund, our county policy states that we should be not less than 15% nor more than 20% of anticipated current year revenues for the fund. We have that set at $8.5 million. We did look at that prior because we have been dinged on our bond ratings for this. So I think that's one of those numbers that we want to continue to look at and to evaluate and make sure we're striving to reach those numbers.
Ms. Pack, do other communities by policy vary much from that, or
no,
higher, or
15 to 20%. It depends on what number you're looking at. From what I recall, it's either 15 to 20% of expenditures or 15 to 20% of revenues. But that's a pretty standard range for most entities, and it's a GFOA kind of recommended, which is government finance officers. It's kind of a recommended range for where that number should fall.
As two related anecdotes, saw a news article where Warren City Commission authorized, they tried to do this calculation as well and project their anticipated losses, and they authorized basically allowing the reserve balance to go down to 15%. We're still trying to get to 15%, but they authorized taking it down to 15%. I saw another one where Shawnee was projecting its losses, and it was in the millions, but they made a few adjustments, and they anticipated that it would take their reserves down to 47%, which is exceptional. It struck me at 47% is beyond what's recommended.
So by policy, we could be higher if we wanted to be.
We could. Part of it.
It never hurts to be higher. Let's put it that way.
Well,
but there is some give and take to that.
Except you at some point you have to acknowledge the fact you're not in the banking business.
Right.
You're not there to hold
Correct.
money.
Right.
You're here to provide public services, and at some point, holding an excessive balance is a handicap.
It's not fiduciary.
Yeah.
Just to be clear, we've been fighting for years to get to our target, our low end of our target balance, and we're still not there.
Ms. Packer, I might make one comment is in respect to the bond and interest fund.
Yep.
It says the reserve should be between 10 and 15%. And we're considerably below that. The target is below that, and I'm wondering if we shouldn't revise the target in that case to be somewhere on the order of 600,000 instead of 200,000. I know that's a fairly stable set of financial numbers. You usually know pretty well where you're going to be, but any more 200 in that fund makes me a little bit nervous.
Yep. Okay.
And we're well above that.
Yeah,
So.
target balance would be way above that. I guess that was
I'm
my
just saying the
question,
target
why the
should
target
be-
balance was so
yeah.
low compared
Yeah,
to what our actual
yeah.
balance has been.
And that's a separate topic that I'll talk about later.
Okay. Okay.
Just to move it along
most of the
here.
other funds don't have specific policies directed to them. They state just that they could support the financial activity of the fund itself. A lot of times we keep fund balances for timing, which is we may not have revenues early in the year, but we may need some fund balance to have some expenditures early in the year. So sometimes those are, that would be a reason to keep those fund balances. The other thing that we see a lot of, in several of these funds, you won't see any fund balance recommendation, and that's because most of those funds are just pass-throughs. For example, transient guest tax, special parks and recreation, those types of funds that we're getting money in and we're giving that money out to a particular entity. The other ones that I will mention, in the special gas tax, as we went through the budget last year and we looked at sales tax and the general fund when we were trying to boost that fund balance, we did intentionally spend down that fund. In 2020, we're still over the target fund balance, so we would probably intend to do that again in this fund 2021 budget. The sanitation fund, we also intended to spend that down in 2021 with the purchase of the carts. So that looks a little high now, but we would anticipate that will come down as we move forward with automation and if we do go forward with that. Solid waste fund, we currently have that at $500,000. We do have a significant balance in there, but as you'll see, we're going to bring some information forward in the near future about some of the long-term capital costs of that fund that we kind of know they're there in our back of our mind, but we're not really putting them out there. So we really need to put that in writing, and we may need to look at transferring that to some sort of reserve fund, especially for closure, post-closure costs, gas remediation, things like that we know are coming in the future, and probably get it out of this fund and get it to some sort of capital reserve fund.
Heavy equipment's another one that hits that one hard.
Yeah.
I thought there was a little bit of a closure, post-closure fund, but it's not a great deal of money.
And we haven't been making regular transfers to that, so
Okay.
that may be what we need to do.
All right. Yeah.
The Gulf Fund, we did not adjust that for this year. The Water Wastewater Fund is another one that we see that has a significant balance. What I wanted to kind of do is tie together, we see this number as a fund balance target, but then we come to you in the fall and we show you the whole rate schedule. And part of that rate schedule focuses on an industry standard of how many days of operating expenditures do you have in your fund balance in order to make sure that you can sustain that fund. And that kind of standard is about 180 plus days, and our target balance is less than 100 days. So we've significantly gone over that. So that might be another one that we kind of need to either evaluate a little bit more or start making sure that we're transferring more of that to a reserve fund.
Excuse me, I'm just stopping, since you stopped right there. Are we anticipating putting any of that balance toward wastewater, the new, not the South Wellfield plant, but the new wastewater plant that's going to be needed? Or have we thought about, if we continue to accrue, would we look at reducing rates at all for consumers?
Well, what we found with that is, as we do that rate study, we have anticipated all of those projects, the wastewater plant, the water plant, the $2 million in cash that we're anticipating starting to spend on water mains.
Showing groundwater contamination.
Groundwater contamination, if we have to debt finance that. All of those projects have been put into the future of that fund. And what we've found is as we've put those in, that fund, that balance comes down very quickly. Because you're talking about $2 million in cash, you're talking about $2 million in debt service for the water plant, $2 million in debt service for the wastewater plant. So that number gets eaten up very quickly as we go through that whole scenario of rates and the rate study. So yes, we have looked at those, and there is a possibility that we may be able to shift funding, debt funding versus cash funding, but that's probably something we'll look at with the rate study when we do that in the fall.
I do think a more detail about that cash flow that Ms. Pack just described verbally, we'll need to provide that when we talk rates and see what that means, whether we can hold line or...
Now, in conjunction with the Water and Wastewater Fund, there is a capital improvements fund that is associated with that doesn't show here, and I believe that's where we're spending the $2 million a year out for the new lines out of.
We currently are debt financing those.
Okay. I thought we were changing that to cash finance.
We will be doing that, I believe, in the 2021 budget.
2021.
Right. So there is some money there that we could also use as instead of debt financing some of these other projects. So we do have some funding in that capital project fund. Then what we wanted to do, Mike mentioned that what we're presenting today is operating funds. Operating funds are those funds that support our services as we do them day to day. The biggest fund, obviously, is the general fund. What we did not include personnel in this picture because, one, we're still working on those numbers, and two, we just wanted to kind of simplify it this way before we looked at those bigger numbers. We'll probably be bringing those numbers of personnel to you next week. So basically, overall in the general fund, the proposed 2021 budget is $9.5 million. That's down about 9.9% from the 2019 actuals. It's down about 11% from the 2020. I said original on this page, but I believe that's probably the revised. So then we felt it was important that the general fund's such a big fund that we kind of go through each of those departments as we talk about police and where their funding is and things like that. We need to be transparent about where those funds are going. And I think it's important to the public to know really how much is supported by the funds that we have. It looks like a big budget, but there's a lot going on in those funds. So the first department that we'll look at is the agency support fund. This is the municipal band support that we provide $20,000 a year, and Skyfire that we have typically provided $5,000 a year. So that did not change in the 2021 proposal. The Arts and Humanities Fund is down about 25%. They have really looked at, and this is just the museum side.
The museum, yes.
Because this is the general fund. The River Festival and the actual Arts and Humanities programming, it comes out of the Arts and Humanities Fund. So this is really just the museum side of that funding. They've reduced some programming and they've deferred some maintenance, and that's what's enabled them to reduce their 2021 budget request. City Commission, it is going up a little bit, 7.3%. We did have an increase in the building authority rent. And the other area that was increased in this budget was legal notices. Those are things that we really cannot predict. So that was one of the numbers that did go up in this detail. I will mention too, I did provide the detail to each of these behind this summary. I will not go through those, but if you have questions that you've gotten as we go along, feel free to stop me and we can talk about those, or we can talk about them when we get done with the summaries, whichever you're more comfortable with. Because I'm not going to go through all of the detail that I provided in the following tables.
Contractual services, that is our building authority contract?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
City manager, let's see where I'm at. That's pretty flat for the 2021 budget. And I won't give you details on anything that didn't change one way or another. I just wanted to give you some examples. Computer technology is going up about 20%. And as we looked at the cost of this, we really had some increased costs of licenses and some of the maintenance agreements that we have signed. We also know that there's some technology needs that we're going to have in 2021 that we've been delaying from prior years.
Yeah, a lot of the computer software organization-wide goes through computer technology. And if we want to keep the software, we pay the bill. It's not all that negotiable.
Development services, it appears that they're down 55%, but I will note that we did an accounting change in 2020 that is making this look like it's going down 55%. We had in the past expensed NRA rebates. We are taking them out of revenue now because it's truly not, it's a reduction of our revenue to pay a rebate. It's not really an expense to the general fund. So it's just an accounting change to how that was being handled, and that's why you're seeing a significant difference in that
So you're
fund.
netting them out of revenue now?
Yes.
And so when you do that, what happens to the city portion of that?
The city portion comes out of revenue, and then we're creating a bill, per se, to the county to reimburse us for the other entities. So the only portion that's truly coming out of revenue is the city portion of the rebate.
Which is reduced, okay.
Correct.
All right.
So if you know anything about sales tax or a property tax, a bill might be $1,000, but 200 of that might be the city's. And whatever that rebate is, that's the portion that's coming out of the revenue.
And $12 might be the rebate, yeah.
Correct,
yeah.
correct.
Okay.
Finance, it's going down. This is another accounting change that we made in 2020. We were accounting for surety deposits, which are deposits from people for performance bonds and things like that, as an expense to the fund, and we've moved those to a liability. We're treating them truly as a deposit. We put them in as a liability. They're not our money. If they perform their duties and we pay them back, we pay them back. If they don't, then we take those monies and we put them into revenue. That's the way we're accounting for those deposits now. The fire department, you'll see, has gone up just slightly, 5.92%. We did include in this budget a hose replacement for an apparatus of $10,000, and we also have a $15,000 3-year maintenance agreement that just happens to come due in 2021. So those were the two big drivers for that particular fund or department. In the human resources, that looks like it appears that it's going up 36.47%, but that one has employed recruitment in it, and that's a number that changes from year to year. It depends on who needs to be recruited. If you have a high level department head that maybe need to be recruited, it might cost you more than recruiting for other levels of departments. So that number fluctuates a lot. So what we did on that is we took an average from the prior years, and 2019 was a significantly low year, so it makes it appear that it's going up significantly, but we truly did budget an average from the prior years.
And I think it's worth noting, as a percentage, it's large. As the overall budget, we're talking $82,000 to $112,000.
Yeah, it's $30,000 in the big scheme because it's a pretty small budget. So municipal court is staying pretty flat. Parks is staying pretty flat. It's going down about 3%. PEG, which is Access TV, this is a number that we budget based on what we think franchise might be. So this number will fluctuate based on what our revenue is. And that's a pass-through number. So whatever comes in is what they get 45% of that revenue. So that number is based on that pass-through. The police department request is going up 15%. I gotta get caught up here. We do have added expenses in this department for the training center. They are looking at upgrading their phone system to be similar to the phone system here in the city-county building, and their in-car and interview room video systems. They also have budgeted $15,000 for portable and mobile radios because we are not sure where the radio project is going to be, so they wanted to have at least something budgeted in case it didn't move along as quickly as we thought it would. Public transportation, this one is truly going down. I was notified by OCCK that during COVID that KDOT is picking up a higher percentage of their cost for 1 year. So through COVID, we'll see a little bit of reduction in 2020, which they indicated would be in some sort of a credit at the end of the year. I want to say that number was around $45,000, but I can't remember for sure because I've seen a lot of numbers lately. But the number that he did provide me for next year is significantly lower because they will be providing 100% of the support for them for like a 7-month period. So the number that he needed to request from us was significantly lower than prior years for that. So that's a positive.
2021, they're also getting a reduction.
Yes, they're getting reimbursed for like a year or a year and a half or something like that. It flowed over to 2021.
Okay.
I think it goes through June 30th of 2021. And then the last general fund department we have is Public Works, and it's remaining pretty flat also. Then the next set of slides, 17 through 40, are the detail that I mentioned earlier. Let's see, get to page about 40, to slide 45. So if you did have any questions on the details of those general fund operating budget requests, most of the department heads are here if you had anything specific about those. Otherwise, we'll go through to the other operating funds.
Could we go down to 19? Sorry.
Sure.
I meant to.
Page 19?
Page 19.
Sure.
And page 19 is the city manager's budget, and I had a couple of questions because, Mike, you had mentioned something in passing a few weeks ago that I didn't quite catch, and that was something that had to do with you had like voluntarily taken a pay cut or were not participating in the shared work program, and I thought that merited, I would like to hear more about that.
I personally took a 10% pay cut while we're in the 2020 budget crunch that we're in, because I'm not able to work share. So,
Right.
And so that doesn't show up in the operational side.
Right.
It would show up in the personnel side. I don't know what that means for 2021. My intention was, as everyone else is in the work share program, and my schedule is just not allowing that between morning meetings and evening meetings and Friday commitments. So as an alternative way to have some payroll savings related to me, I took a voluntary pay cut.
Well, thanks. I just wanted to call that out because you mentioned that very casually, and I thought that it merited a thank you. So thank you very much. I appreciate that. And then the other question I did have, coming back again to our legal services, it looks like we've allowed for almost an 11% increase in that category. And I just wonder where we are with conversations about, I know we've talked about different operational models with Salina Media Connection today, and, seeing any double-digit increase, well, actually any increase at all, to me warranted looking pretty closely at it. And I just wondered if you could speak to that.
Yeah, with Scott Gardner's help, we've gone back and gone through the invoices in detail, tried to identify kind of the significant cost generators, and there's three that stand out amongst all the rest. Municipal court's one of them, development services is another, and then city manager, city commission, which could be everything from litigation to agreements and just kind of that catch-all that comes through the city commission. And then I've also asked him to, there's a category of other, which can be everything from Schilling Air Force Base to just one-off type things. I've asked him to try to incorporate that so that it doesn't stand alone. It's in that analysis. So one of the things we're looking at is an alternate approach to municipal court, whether we can bring in someone to provide backup services either by way of agreement with an individual or with an agency. I think there's an opportunity for significant savings there, just not prepared to budget it because we don't have that plan in place. And then I think our other focus is trying to look at those cost generators. I'm hopeful that Showing Air Force Base is going to be behind us, and some of our agreement negotiations, those type of things are going to be behind us. But it always seems like something crops up. But
that's what I was thinking too. I mean, we're really close
so if we can target our efforts to those three high cost generators, I think that's probably where our opportunity for savings lies.
Thank you.
The other thing that I asked Scott to work on, and he hasn't had an opportunity to do just yet, is to actually look at the hours. And we're looking at the dollars, but when you look at the hours and the amount of service that we're getting, and you talk about the equivalent of full-time employees, if we were to take a different approach, it's startling how many hours of service we're getting.
Thank you.
And I will admit, from a budget perspective, we did just carry that number forward from the 2020 budget. We didn't go back and do any averages or anything like that because it seemed to be, it goes up and down every year as we've seen in those numbers, so.
Thank you.
Any other questions on that page or any other pages before 45?
Don't think so.
So besides the general fund, we do have some other funds that we, that do have operating budgets in them. But the first one is the Arts and Humanities. I mentioned earlier, this is the fund that covers the Arts and Humanities programming and the Smoky Hill River Festival. They too have done a great job of trying to go through and see where they can do some cost savings. They've had some pilots that have ended, so they've been able to capture the cost savings there. They've reduced some programming. They did already pay some deposits for the 2021 River Festival, since we didn't have the 2020 budget River Festival, so those will go forward to the next one. So that was some savings for them in their operating budget for 2021.
My understanding is they were in contract with some artists for 2020 and were able to roll them over to 2021, so that's what helps avoid that cost in 2021.
The sanitation fund, it does appear that number looks like it's going up, but it focuses around the purchase, the automated trucks and the purchase of the carts, and the numbers for the debt service and the cash payment of those carts. As we recall, that number was close to $1 million, and so that would significantly skew that number from a percentage from the 2019 actuals. The solid waste fund is about 22% down. That's a reduction in the vehicle purchases, and the upside of that is that the county road maintenance fee has gone up.
Which I'm not going to comment on now, but I may eventually, because that is a burr under my saddle.
I believe we have an agreement for that one, so. Central Garage is staying pretty flat. They've done a really good job of trying to look at what they've ordered and not have too many stock parts on hand, and just trying to be a little bit more efficient with their spending on that fund. Water, wastewater appears to be going up a little bit from 2019. That would be that they did not spend all of their system enhancements in 2019. They're not budgeting a full $2 million in 2021, but it is pretty close. And then their vehicles were a little higher than 2019. Skip the golf course. And then the last one of our operating funds is the golf course. They've budgeted the 2021 to go down about 17%. I didn't have anything specific, but I do have the detail there, as you can see.
With respect to the golf course, I know a couple of months ago that they gave us a projection on the rounds they'd need to be playing this year to break even. Mm-hmm. Is it possible we can get an update on that to try to figure out?
In fact, I don't know.
I saw the monthly, the report with the packet from the department head said they're having a lot of activity, but that kind of begs the question as to whether we're breaking even or not.
Well, this is the time to make hay, and so I think the numbers are good. I may put Jeff Hammond on the spot if he's willing to speak to it off the cuff.
I've been out of the office for 10 days, so I'm about 10 days behind on their report. Jeff Hammond, Deputy Parks Rec Director. But so far, for the reports I've been giving Mike, they've been averaging about 300 to 500 rounds per week, and revenues are certainly exceeding expenses. I don't have them in front of me to give you an accurate.
And I would have to look back and see what. Remember, originally they'd given us a number of rounds that they thought they could break even at, and I want to make sure we.
My recollection is it was under 100, but the difficulty was that was paid rounds and. Compared to
I understand that.
Membership rounds and paid rounds,
versus people who may have bought annual memberships and who are not paid rounds per se.
But they definitely are taking in more revenue than expenditures at the moment.
And you'd certainly hope so at this time of the year, because the last 2 months of the year I've seen be pretty pathetic.
Heat of the summer and
So,
like I said, making hay.
Okay.
And then As Mike mentioned earlier, the last thing we wanted to talk about was revenue estimates. And as we know with COVID, it's been a little bit difficult to even predict what's going to happen in the next year and a half. So basically what I wanted to do here was provide, from the general fund perspective, where the revenue information comes from, just so that you could get a broader understanding of kind of where we're getting these numbers when we present them, whether they're concrete numbers, whether they're historical, just average numbers and that type of thing. The first revenue type is property tax. We do have restrictions of the tax lid. That information is calculated based on the assessed valuation and the mill levy. We do have we do have the assessed valuation now. We get that around June 15th. Our estimate and then I wanted to provide you also kind of how we've done in the past. So in 2019, what we kind of budgeted or estimated, and then what we actually did so that you could see how close those numbers actually come. Delinquent property tax is just historical data. We never know from year to year how much people are going to, but it's pretty consistent. So we can kind of look at that number and see kind of get a basic understanding. We typically try to underestimate that number because we really don't know what that number is going to be. Motor vehicle tax is an estimate we do get from the county. We have gotten that estimate from them for 2021, which is the $1.2 million. That's about $200,000 over what we estimated or we actually collected in 2019. Sales tax is, again, historical data. Franchise fees are also historical data, and not only are they harder to predict, but they're harder to predict because a lot of those are based on weather. So it's harder to determine what those numbers might be. So we really have to look at averages and kind of where the growth patterns have been for those usages. Liquor tax is an estimate that we get from the state. We have received that estimate at $235,000 roughly. Which is about $20,000 more than what we actually collected in, about $7,000 or $8,000 more than what we collected in 2019. The rest of these grants, investment income, EMS, municipal court, fees and charges, licenses, and transfers and other revenue are all based on historical data. We do have some constraints with transfers. They have to fall under a statute. Obviously, any of the fees that we collect are based on our comp fee schedule. So as we change those fees, those revenues, we may estimate those up or down. We typically don't change those numbers very much, so we probably wouldn't estimate those numbers to go very high. I did want to show, too, that we did get part of the property tax information, just so you know kind of where we are. Our current valuation is $455 million roughly total, which looks to be a little less than what it was assessed at July 1st last year. However, last year we had some pending exemptions that were higher than what we do this year. So our overall, the bottom line on that table there, the $449,000 is the assessed valuation that the city would actually receive those funds. We're taking out any of the valuation for any of the TIF districts because, as you know, that's the value that we don't get directly. It goes to the TIFs. So basically, we haven't grown a lot in our assessed valuation. I provided here what our current general mill levy or our mill levy rate is. The one thing that we do have to deal with on property tax is tax lid. So what I wanted to provide you here was there's two sections to the tax lid based on we can levy taxes up to a specific CPI that's provided by the state, additional taxes based on that, and we can also levy taxes in excess of the new improvements and things like if we've had NRAs that have come back into the assessed valuation. So those are what I call direct adjustments to our ability to levy taxes. So based on just those, we could levy about $429,000 more in taxes this year than we did last year without going against the tax lid. I don't know how to exactly explain that. There's another section to the tax lid that allows you to have exemptions to the tax lid, and those are based on your public safety and your debt service expenditures for the next year. So basically, those are whatever you spent in the prior year or you budgeted in the prior year, and the difference if you're going up in what you plan to budget in the next year, there's some exception for that you can actually issue additional property tax without violating the property tax lid. So we don't have all of that information because obviously we haven't tied down those budgets for public safety. So we don't have that number, but I did want to just provide this number, that we do have this information. So that just kind of gives us a little bit of idea of where we could go with our tax levy.
And the 429 would represent about 1 mil, or?
Yes, I did calculate that it'd be about 2.9%. It would take us to about 30.576, which, yeah, it's a little less than 1 mil. If we chose to go that direction without violating the tax lid restrictions. Now, that number will go up, or could go up, based on what we do with some of those other budget items, the debt and the law enforcement and the public safety numbers. So, but that gives us kind of a minimum of where we'll be.
I would note the personal property values are still dropping significantly.
They are.
What happened from 20 to 21? Because it looked like they'd kind of stabilized for about 3 years or so.
They've gone down about $1.8 million.
Do you know why?
We did have in 2020, there was an exemption that was filed because it was part of our pending exemptions last year.
Okay.
So I believe that was about a $1.5 million pending exemption.
Okay.
I don't remember specifically who it was.
Okay.
But I believe that was
So
as a result of an exemption that
an
somebody
exemption.
filed.
Okay.
Right. And then the last slide is the calendar. It's very overwhelming because, as you know, we have to submit our budget. We have not gotten any indication that we're going to get any leeway from this by August 25th. So we have to that date, we have to back into everything that we need to get done before that date. We have to have a public hearing that has to be held by 8:15. We must we must do our publication 10 days prior to that, which also that publication includes what our minimum mill levy is going to be. So we really have to tie some things up before we do that publication. So just backing into those dates, you will see that we are proposing and requesting a study session next Monday. Unless we want to kind of combine some of those things, that's kind of where we are on the calendar. So any other questions about what we've proposed moving forward? You're just ready to go home.
I have about 20 questions flagged, but I'll put them in an email and send them to the city manager instead of spending the next hour and a half going through them here.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Thank you.
I thought you might like that.
Just this once.
Yeah.
So if we're talking a special meeting on the 29th, that's also the date of our other planned meeting.
We
Want to have that early so I can go home and take a nap?
We would
is it wanna
anticipate
run it
that
all the way through?
2:30, just like a study session would be I don't know, I haven't talked to Mike about that, but that would be
How long will we need?
Oh, I'd say an hour and a half. I mean, we're going to try to cover CIP, sub-CIP, and personnel.
Mm-hmm.
That's a tall order. And we have to have it prepared for you as well. I mean, whether it's here or whether you have a willingness to have special meetings on some other dates, staff needs the time to pull the information together as well. But so it could easily be an hour and a half, 2 hours.
Mm-hmm. Speaking for myself, I'm not going to be in town until later that afternoon, so I won't be available for a special study session on that date. I don't know if we want to do, and certainly the four of you, obviously, whatever you want to do, but would there be any ideas about including that and doing a longer study session, say like starting at 1 or 1:30, on the 6th, or?
What about the 2nd?
Well, that would depend on what the regular agenda at 4 o'clock
Right.
holds, I think.
I hesitate to ask this, but if you're willing to fall into a 1 o'clock schedule for a while, we can probably use that over multiple study sessions till we get the budget under our
1
belt.
o'clock?
I'm sorry?
1 o'clock? And then we'd skip the 29th and go to...
Yeah,
What?
potentially, yeah. If we,
What about 1 o'clock? I mean, I don't know. It's.
We may
a
not
di- a-
need
a
1
different-
o'clock after that first one.
yeah,
A
if we,
different day of the week,
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Is there a way
you know,
we could do
instead
the,
of,
the different,
4
yeah.
o'clock on a Tuesday or 5?
We can certainly try that. In terms of us putting together another packet or trying to prepare for 2 different dates, but we can try to prepare both of them on distribute them on a
study session packet
Thursday
would
and
just
break
be
them out.
study session stuff. It may
Right.
actually give you an extra day or 2 to work on that.
Well, as it falls right now, with us not working on Fridays, getting the packet out the door on Thursday is kind of the last
yeah,
thing we
we're
get
not
done for
working
the week.
Friday.
If you had to have it ready by Monday anyway,
Yeah,
could we
we can-
just have it ready and just do it? I mean,
Yeah, we could
because
do
I would,
both of
because
them
I
on
think
Thursday and.
you
Well,
spend
we
enough
could
time in
provide it
that
to them
meeting
on
and you-
Monday at their regular meeting for the study session Tuesday or Wednesday of that week. Is
Yeah,
that what
that
where you
might
were
work.
going?
If that's
That
less
might work.
turnaround time for you, but that might be helpful for staff.
Yeah, that might work.
I may have some. I may have some on that Tuesday.
Thursday does not work well, I can tell you that, because we
Yeah.
have packets to get
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
And we may find that if we do one early, for example, if we did the July 6th one early, 1 o'clock, then we may find that the others may fall into place. But, because that also gives us an extra 2 weeks to prepare.
I'm worried about
Do you want to try a,
point. And then,
We do have a kind of a date that's not, the 7/27 budget loose ends is in there for that reason, Commissioner Ryan, if there's a hiccup. Or if we get to issues and options and there's information that we need to change, or, we have things that are going on. We do have that one study session on 7/27 that we do that on purpose because we need it every year.
so what if we tried a study session on Tuesday, June 30th, and a 1 o'clock study session on Monday, July 6th as a starting point? And then we can kind of,
Tuesday,
Regroup.
June
1
30th
o'clock.
would be in the late,
yeah, we could do it
late
late afternoon. Yeah, if
Tuesday,
that's,
June 30th, at what time?
I would need it, 4:30. I mean,
5 o'clock.
even better.
I have something.
Got anything?
I don't know, I think.
Just,
Can you send us out some
Alternatives?
alternatives? Yeah.
and if it works best for everybody else for the, to have the thing on the study session on the 29th, I'm also thinking in terms of, there's a lot of material to get around and some thought that's going to need to go into that special meeting on the 29th, and I'd prefer to have
That
you
plus
guys
the
as
study session.
that as your focus and not trying to do 2 different things, because I know you'll want to be involved, obviously, in both of those things. Neither one of them is on autopilot, so.
once again, I appreciate you acknowledging that. That's definitely true.
I would rather stay away from a 1 o'clock meeting on a day that we're going to have a long meeting in the evening and a potentially 2 or 3 hour meeting in the afternoon. That just, and all of which are going to have, I haven't even started to digest all the material you've
Right.
sent out, including this one,
Yeah, I'm sorry, you're talking about the 29th?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm with Mayor Hoppick. See if you can send out a couple of dates that we can all weigh in on and
Okay.
we have to acknowledge some of us may have to miss some of them.
Absolutely,
Yes.
absolutely.
In general, mornings versus afternoons?
Probably.
Is the building open at 6:30 in the morning?
It is.
The door was locked for the first time ever this morning when I came in, but
So
Yeah,
we'll,
just,
we,
1 o'clock is rather disruptive to the business day.
yeah.
So your preference is early morning or late afternoon? Is that what you're saying?
It's easier to delay a start to a day or wrap it up a little earlier than take a chunk out in the middle.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can do 7 a.m.
So, yeah.
My
and
jammies, I can too.
what's your willingness to get back on the 2:30 schedule for, like, well, you used to do with study sessions?
Yeah.
So assume
definitely.
that and then try to find some other dates to supplement that with? Okay.
As a study session prior to the meeting? That's my next question.
Yes.
Yeah, in general.
Yes.
On Mondays.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, so we'll assume 2:30 study sessions, and I'll try to identify some additional dates to supplement those.
Okay.
That's on the 29th.
Well, with the 29th, we won't meet then. We'll just have the evening meeting, and then we'll assume 2:30 study sessions for all these other dates, and then we'll poll you about some additional dates.
Okay.
Okay.
We're going at 2:30
Okay. Yes, there's no action to be taken, so we will move into development business 8.1.
Item 8.1, resolution number 20-7840, authorizing a permanent in-ground swimming pool and storage shed to be placed in a public utility easement in the rear yard at 2224 River Trail Road.
Mr. Andrew.
Thank you for agreeing to add this to your agenda this evening, and I think the applicant would thank you as well. We are in the middle of seasonal pool season. I don't have all the numbers, but from my experience, it's a record number of requests for backyard pools this year, above ground, below ground, seasonal, permanent, all kinds. I got 3 more this afternoon. This was a request to install a pool in a rear yard in the River Trail addition, and the extenuating circumstances are a shallow lot depth, which is 110 feet, and then the fact that there's no lots on the other side of the line. Normally you'd have an easement that was 10 feet either side of the line, but because of the oxbow, the utility providers requested a 20-foot easement at the rear, and then in the end none of them chose to use it. So the usual arrangement would be on a residential subdivision, you'd have electric, cable, and phone would be in the rear easement, and gas, sewer, and water would be out front. In this case, electric, cable, and phone chose to install in the front because they didn't want to compete with the slope of the oxbow in the rear. So it turns out we have an easement that's 20 feet wide with nothing in it, and the long-term correct solution would be to vacate that easement, but we're still in the process of that and working with all the other owners along there. So we met with Mr. Gertson and gave him, as you can see, a number of options, and he preferred the option of taking it before this body to consider whether you would authorize the construction of the pool within the 20-foot easement, understanding that we have letters from all the utility providers that there's nothing in there and it would not be a conflict. Long-term, we may be coming back with you for a full vacation of the easement, but because of the seasonality of pool season, this is the quickest remedy for the owner, and we have offered to provide some findings on page 4 of your report that we think justify allowing this in this particular instance. and staff simply doesn't have the authority to issue a permit if it's occupying an easement. So your options this evening would be to approve the attached resolution that would authorize a permit to be issued for the placement of an in-ground pool and a future shed in a 20-foot utility easement at the rear of 2224 River Trail. You could postpone consideration of this request to a future date if you feel like additional information is needed to reach a decision, or to allow staff to modify the resolution, or you could decline to approve the resolution in front of you and provide further direction to staff and the applicant. We don't like bringing these to you frequently, but we think in this particular case, this is the best solution for this conflict. So with that, I'd be open to any questions.
To vacate that, do all the adjoining property owners need to enter into that agreement?
Well, what we were going to do is determine who all the owners were, contact them, and then I was working with the city engineer to have the city engineer initiate the petition for all the lots and just get the consents of those owners. Rather, if Mr. Gertson just applied to vacate the petition behind his lot, then you might be faced 3 months later with somebody else petitioning to do it behind their lot. So we're trying to take a comprehensive approach and contact all the owners and do it at one time.
Do you anticipate any scenario in which an owner would oppose vacating the petition?
I don't think if they had all the information in front of them. Some of these, like I said, these owners just bought the lot in April, and so some of them haven't even had time to contemplate putting sheds or other things in the backyard. Right. So we think that the fact that some of the houses are so newly occupied that this is going to come up again, and so we're trying to get out ahead of it by...
Almost certainly.
Yes.
If you weren't planning on doing that, I was going to request that we do that.
There's
be
five lots in a
motion,
row that are 110 feet deep, and so we can be pretty sure that it would happen again.
And so you do have authorization from all the utility companies that they
I have authorization from all the utility companies who do not object to this pool being placed there, nor will they object if we initiate a vacation petition. But
Yeah, I think that's the bigger risk of a hiccup would be if a utility objected.
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah, this has been done. There was an occasion on Sierra Drive where we approved a pool in an easement, but the pool in the easement actually had underground electric running through it, and we had a number of stipulations that we had to do to address Evergy's concerns, but in this case, nobody's back there, so we're not having any conflict. And the main reason we're bringing it to you in this form is because pool season is getting in the anxious people to get their pools up, and the time frame for a vacation with first and second reading and getting all that, this seemed like to be the faster approach for this particular owner.
That resolution will be recorded at the Register of Deeds office.
It will be recorded in Register Deeds with the exhibit attached, yes.
And we should be expecting to see that vacation, that easement vacation or vacating of easement or whatever coming before us in the next month or two?
Hopefully in July.
Okay.
And if not, then at least by the 1st of August. But we've got a map, we've got contacts with the utilities, and it's just a matter of putting together a petition and getting everybody contacted. But that would be the plan, that this would be step one, and the longer-term solutions to get rid of the easement.
Okay, I would ask for comments from the public, but it looks like the public has left us, so I will bring it back to the commission for...
Topic, I would move the City Commission approve resolution number 207840, authorizing the placement of an in-ground pool and future storage shed in a 20-foot utility easement at 2224 River Trail Road, and recognizing the 5 exceptions presented by staff.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to approve resolution number 20-7840. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That passes 5-0. Thank you, Mr. Andrew.
Allow us to issue Mr. Gertzen his pool
Okay.
permit.
I'll go over and join him in the pool one of these days. Okay.
Maybe we all will, come to think about it.
Okay, that brings us to other business. We have a couple legal executive sessions. How long will the first one?
I think because they are both legal considerations, if you meld the topics into one motion, you can make one motion for 30 minutes.
So then both of these nice long need to be read consecutively.
Well, yeah, if you get through one topic and then just say and add the other topic, I don't know they have to read them both in their entirety.
Thank you.
but
How much for each?
Okay.
30 total.
30 total.
Okay, Mayor Hoppick, I move the City Commission recess into executive session for 30 minutes to discuss with the city's legal counsel the subject of legal considerations relating to administration of the environmental response action associated with pending litigation in U.S. District Court relating to the former Schilling Air Force Base environmental matter, as well as legal representation of the city in response to a notice of claim of a potential lawsuit filed by legal counsel for Melissa Fullen, Matthew Fullen, and Beverly Fullen, based upon the need for consultation with an attorney for the public body, which would be deemed privileged in the attorney-client relationship pursuant to KSA 75-4319B2. The open meeting will resume in this room, should we say a nice even 8 o'clock?
Okay.
It's actually 32 minutes, but...
Second.
Have a motion second to go into executive session. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We'll be back in this room in about 30 minutes.
And there is the possibility of action on one of the two items to follow.
Summarize all this stuff.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we are back in session, and we do have one order of business before us.
Mayor, I have a motion. I move that the City Commission approve and authorize the city manager to sign a waiver of potential conflict of interest and consent to representation in that Terrell Mock of the law firm of Fisher, Patterson, Saylor, and Smith, LLP, has been asked to represent the city of Salina and Saline County in the matter of the Fullen claims.
Second.
We got a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That passes 5-0. With that, I will accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion second to adjourn. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? We'll see you next at the special meeting.
Thank you, Commissioners.